President Trump is taking a victory lap with 30 days until the midterms, and his Supreme Court pick is very much front and center.
Brett Kavanaugh is a man of great character and intellect. He's a totally brilliant scholar who has devoted his life to the law. The biggest thing a president can do, they've always said, is Supreme Court justice, the biggest. And some have had none. We've had two in less than 2 years.
Brett Kavanaugh is the second justice that Trump appointed to the Supreme Court, giving conservatives a clear majority. Other big wins that Trump can count, the unemployment rate is at 3.7%, the lowest in 49 years. There's also the new trade deal to replace NAFTA, and Congress passed a major bipartisan bill to fight the opioid epidemic. Lisa, you've got to imagine that this might be the week that Trump supporters are sick of winning, because he's got a lot of victories in his column. One of the biggest weeks, I think, of his presidency.
Oh, this was definitely one of the best weeks of his presidency, and people in the White House are feeling extremely good. I think it also has told us something interesting about his support. So in 2016, I sort of thought that, and a lot of people, of course, had thought that the president won in spite of his comments about Access Hollywood, the Access Hollywood tape. And now I kind of wonder if he won in part because of those comments. And by that I mean there has been polling about his supporters, and they are more likely to believe in things like reverse racism, or that white men are under siege in this country. And that's part of what we saw, that part of the base coming out and being really loud during this fight. And what this fight served to do, this Kavanaugh fight, is unify the Republican Party behind the president. That part of the base, and also, more like typical, I don't know if they're typical, more moderate Republicans, what we think of like old line Republicans now who want a conservative justice. They're now unified. The question is whether that endures over the next 30 days. I think we don't know the answer to that.
It's a classically Trumpian, almost whataboutism argument where they, they say worry about Dr. Ford. We say worry about Brett Kavanaugh. They say worry about your daughters being sexually assaulted and not believed. We say worry about your sons being falsely accused. When it is a false equivalence, we all know sexual assault is a bigger problem than people being framed for sexual assault. But this argument that he makes works. It riles people up. It fuels them. The question, of course, can it sustain for the next month? The midterm election.
And one of the things we hear
from yesterday.
One of the things we hear the president saying is it's not about the people whose names are on the ballot. It really is about him. Here's what he had to say.
I'm not on the ticket, but I am on the ticket, because this is also a referendum about me. Get out and vote. I want you to vote. Pretend I'm on the ballot. And don't worry, we'll be on the ballot in 2 years, and we will do a landslide like you wouldn't believe.
So, two things. One, we have noticed a change in President Trump since all of the Kavanaugh allegations surfaced. He's doing multiple rallies a week, and I go to a lot of these, and I've seen him go from instead he would never talk about the candidate really and never really talk about the midterms. And it's like, hello, this is about the midterms. You might lose the House. People really wanted him to be there talking about the candidates, and often it would just be him reciting his greatest hits. We are now seeing him switch over and start talking about the midterms a lot more during these speeches. But secondly, to follow up on Trump's greatest week, I love this narrative because I do think this was a really successful week for the White House. But the idea that a successful week for a president now looks like your Supreme Court nominee being accused of sexual assault, having to testify, and a damning report from the New York Times exposing your finances and upending essentially what you've been telling the American public for decades is just comical to me that is what a really good week for this president. And what we now, our bar for politics is so low now that this is a good week. That just blows my mind.
It's certainly a good week for his supporters, and we'll hear from some of them here. I think this is in Mississippi. Here's what they had to say.
I'm not tired of winning yet. I mean, the economy's booming, the military's stronger. I mean, what else do we need, really? I'm satisfied with the way things are, and I'd like to keep it that way.
I want to make sure that the Republicans hold the Senate and the House so that we can follow Trump's agenda.
The most important thing to me right now is building the wall, making sure we get the aliens, illegals from coming in, health care, everything important that's important to Trump is important to me, all his agenda.
I mean, these folks are among the most fervent Trump fans. It's Mississippi, it's a Trump rally, but they are very fired up about this president.
Absolutely. But Trump's message about him being on the ballot, I think it depends on where you live as to whether that's a good message, because there are candidates in suburban districts that are like, no, he's not, I'm on the ballot. And absolutely do not want that to be the case. So I think you'll see some candidates using that and some saying, he's entitled to his opinion.
And you think about these Senate races, I mean, you think about Nevada, you think about Arizona, purple states, and if you're Heller or if you're McSally, you might be a little dicey in terms of if you want the president there.
Right. So Trump saying he's on the ballot is bad for Republicans in the House. It's probably good on balance for Republicans in the Senate, because the Senate map is very red, it's very Republican, it's very rural, and most of these people like President Trump a lot. He won states like West Virginia and North Dakota by massive margins. Manchin, the one Democrat who broke, is from the state that President Trump won by the largest margin.
It's like 42%. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Exactly. And one of the things that President Trump and I think has been his strategists and Republicans close to him have impressed upon him is that one of their biggest concerns is that his strong, hardcore voters love him. Are they going to turn out to support a Republican down the ballot when he's not on the ticket? They worry a lot about that.
That's a big question. And obviously, Lisa, you look at independent voters a lot, particularly independent women. They're the ones that folks are looking at, too, in terms of what they're going to do.
Right. And this was not good for independent women. Right. Independent women were the ones who turned most quickly and most strongly against the Kavanaugh nomination, and particularly when the president gets out there and makes fun of the allegations made by Christine Blasey Ford. That's really bad with independent women. I mean, look, how this plays depends, as most things in politics, where you sit, what state you're in, what the dynamics are of those states. In red states, this is probably hurtful for Democrats. In swing states, this is probably hurtful for Republicans. But for the president's base, it's really the perfect thing, right? He was able to motivate his base with kind of this red meat, anger kind of stuff. And he also was able to motivate the sort of traditional, like moderate Republicans who want to see things done. And this is the biggest thing really he could get done for Republicans. This is culmination of decades worth of activists and policy work by the Republican Party to cement a conservative majority on the Supreme Court.
For decades from now.
For decades. And whatever else we say about the president, he did get that done.
He did get this done. It's true.